Hello, YouTube. This is Emails03. In the previous lesson, we brought up the concept of regular expressions, and we said basically if we take a string, we can try to see if there's a certain match. Basically, we can try to see if there's a particular substring or if that string that we're looking at has a particular pattern within it, okay? And so we can basically, what we need to do is we need to import the re module. We said that we need to go ahead and import re, okay? So it's a module that allows us to use some important functions from the re module, okay? And so basically those functions are called re.match and re.search, okay? My original plan was to use this lesson and only this lesson to talk about something called metacharacters, and then to be able to proceed on to other topics. In the last two videos, I was only going to have two more Python tutorial lessons after this one. But there's actually a lot to say about regular expressions and metacharacters. So instead of rushing the topic, we're going to basically be reviewing a lot of what we said about regular expressions in this video. And then we're going to talk about some new methods, some new techniques for regular expressions. And then we're also going to talk about a little bit about metacharacters. But then we're not going to really talk about advanced metacharacters or groupings until the next lesson. So not including this lesson, there will still be three more lessons after this one. Okay, so I'm thinking probably, I mean, that would probably put us at about 45. Okay, so hopefully that sounds good to you. But what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and review some of the things we talked about in the previous lesson. Okay, one of the things we said some lessons back, I think on lesson maybe 37 or 38, is we said, remember that we can go ahead and swap the values of two variables with AB equals BA. So hopefully you remember doing that, so if you said R equals, right, and then what if you basically had a set? So what if you had the element 5, and then what if we had bool of 3.2, so that should be a false, or a true, excuse me, and then you have bool of 1, so that should also be a true, right? And so basically, you could basically have a variable that would keep track of the length of R. Okay, so that would be the number of duplicate elements in the set. And okay, so basically that would be 2 because you have 5 and you have true, because we said a bool of anything besides 0, 0.0, empty string, and false is true. So hopefully that's clear to you. But we're going to have len1 is length of R, and then we could say S, and we could basically, maybe we'll have a dictionary now. So maybe basically we'll go ahead and send 0 to the letter E, okay? And then maybe we'll send the letter E to the number 1, okay? And then maybe we could send the true Boolean to the false Boolean, right? So basically, then we could say len2 is equal to the length of S, okay? And then what we could do is we could say len1, len2 equals len2, len1. Okay, so now if we try to print len1, instead of just seeing 2 elements because there were 2 duplicate elements in the set, we should see 3 elements because there are 3 key value pairs in the dictionary S. Okay, so hopefully that's clear to you because we basically swapped the values of the 2 variables. And I just wanted to take a minute or two to show you that again. So now if we go ahead and print length 2, we should be printing 2 right afterwards. So we should print basically 3 first and then 2, even though the number of key value pairs in the dictionary was 3, even though that's the second variable here, we did the swap. So hopefully that's clear to you. And then if we go ahead and run it, you see the 3 and the 2. So hopefully that's clear to you. And then I'm printing some other things beneath here. What I also wanted to say in this video was that you can actually print multiple things at the same time on the same line. So here's what I mean by that. Basically what we said is basically print of A and print of B. Okay, so basically if you try to print 2 different things on 2 different lines, basically this has the effect of printing A and B on 2 different lines. Okay, so basically if you were thinking about this from a Java perspective, right, you might remember that I also have a set of Java tutorial videos, right? So if you think about in Java, this would be equivalent to system.out.println, right? And then you could say of A and then system.out.println of B, okay? But then what you could do is for Python, there is a convenient way to print multiple items on the same line. Simply separate arguments or things that you're trying to print with commas. Okay, so that's what you're going to do. That's the technique here. So basically what you would do is you would say print of X and Y, basically. And then what this would do is it would print X, then Y on the same line. So hopefully that's clear to you. And then basically this would, in Java, what the equivalent printing representation would be is system.out.print of X, and then system.out.print of Y. Okay, so hopefully that's clear to you. And then, presumably, if X and Y, are the same data type. So remember, we talked about how we could have a simple concatenation, right? You could concatenate one string with another string. Okay, so if you said print of first string, comma, second string, that would have a very similar effect. Okay, so hopefully that's clear to you. But we could go ahead and see an example of that too as well. And then we really want to talk about regular expressions and metacharacters. So then if you go ahead and say print of sup, and then we're going to go ahead and just have a comma here, and then we could go ahead and print a tuple representation. Okay, so now then if we go ahead and run it, if we go ahead and run this line of code, then it just says sup and then 9.2 on the same line. So hopefully that's clear to you. And I just wanted to give you another technique for printing things on the same line. So basically the print function can accept multiple arguments, and presumably we could have said that sometime before lesson 42, but it's better to have it in lesson 42 than to never have it at all. And then you might also remember that we can also have private functions. So one of the things I said in the previous lesson, remember back in lesson 38, we talked about how variables can either be public or private. And then at that point, if they're private, are they, weakly private, which means, they're not really private at all. They're just sort of discouraged from using outside of the class. Or are they strongly private, which means that you're literally prohibited according to, Python mechanics from using those variables outside of the class. And so functions are going to behave the same way. So if you say x dot underscore underscore f, basically this would mean that you're calling an instance method you're calling an instance method that's private on an instance called x, within the class where x is defined. Or maybe you have an actual class called x and you're calling a class method that's static. Okay, so hopefully that's clear to you. But usually you'd have like parentheses on here, right? But that's basically what we have going on here. So we could see a quick example of that. But we had the class architecture, and so hopefully that's clear to you, is that if you have two underscores before an instance variable name, it's strongly private. If you have two underscores before a function name, it's strongly private. It means that you can call that function only within the class in which it's defined. So hopefully that's clear to you. We can go ahead and do a quick review of what we said about regular expressions in the previous video. So remember, after we import RE, you need to have that be at the top of your program. You need to go ahead and import that module like we talked about in the previous video. But we're going to be looking at a pattern and a wordToCheck. And remember, a pattern is just a string. It's just a pattern that we're looking for. But you need to basically have double quotations on it, and then it's going to have an R. So don't forget an R before the string. And then there's also a wordToCheck. Okay, so that could be a sentence or a paragraph, but it's a word that you're going to be parsing to look for some pattern, some letter or character, some kind of special character or pattern within it. So hopefully that's clear to you. Just have a pattern and a wordToCheck. And then after those two things, you can call these two functions that belong to the RE module. So re.match of pattern and wordToCheck, or re.search of pattern and wordToCheck. And we said that the difference is that re.match of pattern and wordToCheck is equivalent to a true Boolean if wordToCheck begins with pattern, and re.search of pattern and wordToCheck is equivalent to a true Boolean if wordToCheck somewhere contains pattern. Okay, so hopefully that's clear to you. And so I just have some examples here on the bottom, and we could go ahead and look at these things, right? But then what we're going to do is we're going to have a pattern and a wordToCheck. So my pattern is CAT, cat, and then we have a wordToCheck application. And so clearly you can see cat in the word application. But here what I do is I basically just have two Booleans here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if re.match of pattern and wordToCheck, then print of match at beginning, right? If re.search of, our ion, for example, in wordToCheck, then you could say print match somewhere, right? So this basically demonstrates the difference between looking at the beginning of the string and looking anywhere in the string. So hopefully that's clear to you. And then one of the examples we had in the previous video, we also talked about the find all function. So if you say re.findAll of, and then a pattern and then a wordToCheck, it's going to return a list where every element in the list is the same. It's just another occurrence of the pattern in the wordToCheck. So if you said, how many do's do you do in this string, since you see 3 do's, right? You see a do here, how many do's, right? And then do, that's another do, and then you do, right? So that's a third do. And so that's why we see a list of 3 do's here. So hopefully that's clear to you, right? And so hopefully that makes sense to you. But yeah, that's why basically, I mean, we're sort of parsing the console output here. So that's why it said no match at the beginning, right? Because cat is not the beginning of application, but since ion is contained in application, we say match somewhere. So hopefully that's clear to you. And then the only other thing we really said in the previous video is we talked about the dot group, the dot start, the dot end, and the dot span. So remember, if you call re.search of pattern in wordToCheck, that's basically an object, and on that object you can apply one of these other functions. Okay, so if you say re.search of pattern in wordToCheck, and then on that whole thing you call dot group, so you call the group function on re.search of pattern wordToCheck. Basically that will return the string that was matched, okay, and it'll return a runtime error if there was no match. Okay, so we could go ahead and see an example of that, right? But you could go ahead and say re.search of our app an app, right? And so there it's just going to go ahead and print app because that was the match, right? And what if you had said something like this, like find my application, right? So here app is still contained within find my application, then it's no problem to return app, right? But then if you had said, if you had said find my location or something, right, then you don't have app in there anymore, and then you can see a runtime error. So hopefully that's clear to you. And then we also talked about dot start, and we said that returns the index position of the beginning of the first occurrence of the pattern in the wordToCheck. Okay, so if you said my dog here, 0, 1, 2, 3, you can see that the letter D is at index position 3. And since that, since DOG, since that string is found within my dog, and since the first occurrence begins at index position 3, we would expect a 3 here. So we can go ahead and run that, and then that's what we would see. And then remember, if we say dot end, remember this returns the index position of the end of the first occurrence, or immediately after the first occurrence of the pattern in the wordToCheck. So this is kind of a lame example here, but if you said toast, and then you said, let's say like ST or something, right? And then what if you said coasts? Okay, so here basically this would give you 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay? Because this S here has index position 5, and that S that you can see selected is where is immediately after the first occurrence of ST in coasts. Okay, so this would be 5, so hopefully that's clear to you. And then span basically gives you a tuple with both of those results. So if you see top and stopping, basically what this does is it's going to give you the index position 1, right? Because that's what the beginning of top, that's where the beginning of top is, at index position 1. And then top ends just before index position 4. So you would go ahead and see a tuple with those 3 elements in it. So now if we go ahead and run it, indeed, you can see the 3, 5, and then the 1, 4, and the tuple, just as we predicted. We can also talk about basically what we can do is we can talk about re.sub of A, B, and C. Okay, so basically what this does, if you say re.sub of A, B, C, this returns string C with all occurrences of pattern A with string B, okay? So then basically remember A is going to be some pattern, okay? And so basically what you're going to do is you're going to return all occurrences of pattern A with string B basically replacing that. So if you have an old string and you say Boston is so cool and Boston has great summers, and then you say new string equals re.sub of our Boston. So Boston's your pattern that you're searching for within string C, remember the third input. And then the B, the second input, is what you're doing the replacement on the pattern, right? So Phoenix is so cool, and Phoenix has great summers is what will be printed. So hopefully that's clear to you. And then I'm just going to go ahead and define 2 functions here. So 2 very simple functions, isMatch and isSearch. They both accept 2 inputs. And so they basically are very similar. So isMatch will return true if re.match of pattern wordToCheck would be a true Boolean. And isSearch will return true if re.search of pattern wordToCheck would be a true Boolean for those pattern and wordToCheck inputs that were fed in, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about metacharacters, okay? So basically what metacharacters are basically they are special characters that will match the existence of sets of characters or particular characters or the number of occurrences of a character. So let me tell you what I mean by that. We've been basically searching for letters or words or specific letters or characters within a string, but it turns out that we can also search for arbitrary characters. So if you have dots here, the dot will match any character with the exception of new lines, okay? And so basically if you had re.search of r, you know, you need to basically always have a r in front of your pattern, and then you have dot, 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 a dot. This would see, okay, well, do you have basically 5 letters in your string, okay, and is the fourth one, you know, in that 5 character sequence an A? Okay, so let me show you what I mean by that. What we're going to do is we're going to say r is match of r, and then we're going to say c dot dot p. So basically this will check to see if the word craps starts with c and then something and then something and then p. So then if we go ahead and run it, indeed it says true. So hopefully that's clear to you. But remember, is re.match is for the beginning of the string. So if you said he craps or something like that, then that would be a problem, right? Because then he craps does not begin with a C and then something and then something and then a P. So the takeaway is that the dot matches any character except a new line. So hopefully that's clear to you. And then we also have basically this upper arrow here. So hopefully you can see that. But basically that will match the beginning of a string. So remember we said that the difference between re.search and re.match is that re.search is for matching anywhere in a string. But the caveat to that is if you go ahead and have this meta character, this up arrow, because now we would only be matching the beginning of wordToCheck. So basically this would match the beginning of the string. It would have to begin with S, and then any character at all. We said, remember that the dot is a meta character that matches any character except a new line, and then a T. So it could start with SAT or STT or SWT, but hopefully that's clear to you. And then similarly, we could also have a $sign, and that will match the end of the string. Okay, so basically this would end with 3 of any letters, any 3 letters, and then a T, and that's how your basically that's how your word would have to end. So hopefully that's clear to you. But we can go ahead and run a few examples of that. So what we could do is we could say print is match of r dot 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 p and then traps. So what would this do? Well, this would basically check to see if traps starts with 3 letters and then a p. So then if you go ahead and run it, then you would see that we get a true there for that last boolean that was printed. So hopefully that's clear to you. And then we could, there's all kinds of examples here, so I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but hopefully this is clear to you. What about this example here? So if we say print is match of r, and then you say corpse dot and then corpse. So corpse does not start with corpse and then one of any other letter. So here the dot is really what disqualifies you. Corpse doesn't start with corpse and something else, right? It doesn't even contain that. Even if you had said is search here, that would still be a problem, right? That would still be false. So hopefully that's clear to you. This is just a lot of examples here, and I want you to get a sense of this, okay? But what I wanted to do is show you an example with that up arrow. So we were saying that, the meta character dot is for matching any character, but the up arrow is for matching the beginning of a string, okay? So basically what we could do is we could replace this with is search, okay? And we could check to see if application starts with app, okay? And so we could say is search of, and then we could say R, and then double quotes, and then the up arrow to denote that we're looking at the beginning of application. So now if you go ahead and run it, it says true. But then if you say ion, we know that application does not begin with ion. So then if you go ahead and run it, it says false. So hopefully that's clear to you. And then we could see another example with the $sign. So remember when we scrolled up, we said that the up arrow matches the beginning of the string. The $sign matches the end of the string. So I'm just going to have a slightly less convoluted example here. But what you could do is you could basically check to see if application ends with ion. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to switch up this example a little bit. But we just want to see if application ends with ion. So now if you go ahead and run it, then you would go ahead and get true there, right? But then if you had just go ahead and put an up arrow there, then it would be checking to see if application begins with ion, just like we just saw, and that would be false. So hopefully that's clear to you. And there's all kinds of other examples. I didn't get quite as far as I wanted to in this video, but in the next video, we're just going to be seeing a lot more examples of these regular expressions and meta characters. There's really a lot to be said about it. So then we can go ahead and predict these 3 real quick, right? We can see R something something K somewhere in the string because we have rocks there. And then for this one, we can see that caps and cups does not start with cups. So this one should be true. This one should be false. and then Baywatch indeed ends with watch, so then the last one should be true as well. So then if you go ahead and run it, those are the last 3 Booleans printed. So hopefully that was interesting. We'll continue in the next video. From me, Mo Sub 3, thanks for watching, and please subscribe.